times have you watched local or national news and seen or heard a story about the Catholic Church and thought, you know, that just doesn't sound right. Something's rotten in Denmark. Well, welcome to the family. That's what we're going to look at today on this episode of The Catholic View for Women. Newsflash, the Pope is still Catholic, differentiating between fact and fiction. I'm Teresa Tomeo, along with my co-host Janet Morana from Priests for Life, Silent No More, and Defending Life here on the network, and also, of course, Astrid Bennett Gutierrez from Hispanics for Life. Okay, now this topic, you know, newsflash, the Pope is still Catholic. Actually, I have a talk that I do called that because it's gotten so bad. It's near and dear to my heart, having spent my entire life in the media. And I think we've seen such abuse in terms of really twisting and getting totally away from the truth when it comes to our Holy Father on the part of the media, taking his words totally out of context.
Well, you know, and I can tell from my work in the pro-life movement, and I'm sure Astrid can attest to this, in the first few weeks of Pope Francis becoming Pope, Father Frank was inundated with emails and phone calls. What's with this Pope? We don't understand with the life issue. Is he going to drift from this? And, you know, because they were so used to, you know, St. John Paul II and of course, Pope Benedict being so strong. They started listening to the media and saying, oh, are we going backwards now? And Father Frank, of course, had to start showing, no, look at what the Holy Father is saying. Don't look what the media is saying. Because that's what happens. People get the sound bites, and very often I don't think they pay attention to good Catholic media. Yes, they watch EWTN, but then what do they do? You know, are they watching EWTN Nightly News? Do they get things like the National Catholic Register? Do they actually go to the Vatican websites? As you know, there's a Vatican News Service, and read what the Holy Father says. The audiences are there every Wednesday. You can read the text. You can read his Angelus, you know, what he says every Sunday at the Angelus.
Statements from the press conferences, the actual whole statement.
Whole statement, not the bite that the media takes and distorts, you know? And so I know, wouldn't you say, Astrid, there was this fear, I think, among the people in the pro-life movement that, are we going off course here, wouldn't you say?
Especially since we didn't really know who he was, Cardinal Bergoglio. We didn't really know who he was. And luckily, I had been in touch with some friends from Argentina who are trying to start up some maternity homes. So I know months before he became Pope, he met with them. And he really encouraged their work to help women that were who were pregnant, homeless, and he was so encouraging. And he throughout his priesthood, he's been very supportive of all the projects of the church, but especially in the pro-life movement. So I believe that the media wants to find something that they can put up there as scandalous or something shocking because that sells. I think the secular media because we have Catholic media.
Good Catholic media.
Exactly. and here in EWTN, you'll have a chance to distill also the spiritual message, the continuity from John Paul II to Benedict to now Pope Francis. There's a continuity of thought, of mission. The church is growing. The church is healing the world, and you're going to miss that if you just watch the secular media.
Right. I also think, in addition to, and you're absolutely right in terms of that whole idea of if it bleeds, it leads. And I was in news. I've been in news my entire life, so that's totally accurate. That they want to find something scandalous because that sells, but also people have to understand that this issue is no longer, I mean, it used to be, well, we would watch and say, as I said in the open of the show, something's wrong with this. I think now it's even worse where people can see that the media are blatantly biased.
That's right.
There is an agenda. Definitely. They believe, and only God can judge their hearts, but they believe they are doing a public service by promoting such things as a redefinition of marriage, contraception, sex outside of marriage, abortion, contraception, they totally see these as accepted, as common as toothpaste and deodorant. And this is a way of life, because in many cases this is law, of course with legalized abortion and states now legalizing so-called same-sex marriage. So to them, they are just putting out there what their version of the world should be and of the truth. But people have to understand that they truly believe that they're idealistic. And this is what they believe is right. And they are going to go to the nth degree to put that in our face and convince us that they are right and that this is the way the world has to be.
And it's an ideology called secular humanism, where we want to remove God, we want to remove just everything that's true and good, marriage, family. So we're being indoctrinated. If we watch, we have to be so careful what we allow our family to view, and ideas, newspaper, headlines. It's all around us.
And it's constant.
We have to be discerning.
Indoctrinated everywhere, not just in the news media, but in programming, in the movies, on on the internet, in music, all of these things over and over and over again.
Right.
I've written 3 or 4 books on this very topic, media influence, and this is what I speak on all the time. We are being indoctrinated and we are being catechized by the culture. And this has happened, unfortunately, to a great many Catholics. I have listeners in my show who email me and disagree on the church teachings, and you try to explain to them that while you have free will, at some point, you have to accept the church teaching. It's not a democracy. God doesn't run a democracy, he runs a kingdom. But the media still treat the church as a democracy. And I've had this discussion, and when I was at the canonization, I was interviewed for a major documentary that the NBC affiliate did in my hometown of Detroit, and I had the conversation with the anchorman who was hosting the show, and I continued it when we got home from Rome, and when I was telling him in Rome that doctrine does not change, he was just, his face, I could see that it was not computing. There was no connection there because in his mind, he even said it in one of his blogs, and I addressed it with him, and I said, you can't go with this approach. I said, it's a nonsensical approach. I said, you want to be taken seriously by the church, and you want to be considered someone who has a little bit of background and authoritative understanding of this, then understand that doctrine doesn't change. A practice can change, a discipline can change, but these core teachings are not going to change. It's like saying, and I said this in the email, that an apple can turn into a pear. It's not going to happen. But again, doesn't understand it.
You know, he wasn't fair in taking everything you said and putting it out there.
No.
He edited just what he wanted, his little soundbite, and the whole thing of what you said, explaining that doctrine doesn't change, well, he shut that down. And you know, the other thing I think with Pope Francis, why the media just kind of ran with it was,
they think they have their guy with him.
Exactly. Well, because you know what it is? When Pope Benedict came to be Pope after John Paul II, Pope Benedict had been inside the Vatican, you know, as working for the Congregation for Doctrine of the Faith for over 2 decades. As a matter of fact, they used to call him John Paul II's Rottweiler, you know, out there on the attack, defending the church's teaching. So the press already knew, oh, more of the same, here we go. They didn't expect Pope Benedict to have a shot at changing any of the church's teaching. They weren't familiar with Pope Francis, and so now they took any little thing he said, like you said, Astrid, and just twisted, took one soundbite, ran with it, and said, oh, here we go. We got a shot here. Oh, maybe, you know, ordination of women, and oh, maybe same-sex marriage, and maybe this, and maybe that. And
showing their ignorance about basic church teaching.
Ignorance, but I also think that there's an arrogance there because they're not stupid. These are educated people who are in the media.
Agenda.
And there's agenda. They're either ignorant or there's a willing arrogance where they're not willing to look at it.
That's right.
And this is what is so frustrating to me. And in this one anchorman's blog before the documentary aired, he said, doctrine hasn't changed. And then he put the word yet with a big exclamation point.
Right. I mean, it's not changed.
And again, trying to convince him that this wasn't the case, there was just this blank stare. And this is what they try to put out, that they are so convinced because all these other churches outside, all these other denominations outside of the Catholic Church have caved on many of these core issues. And they see Pope Francis as the one who's going to bring in change, but they ignore so many of the positive statements where he reaffirms church teaching. And we've been talking on this season of the Catholic View for Women, how he's calling us to go deeper, a deeper theology of women. He's referring back to the Catechism over and over again. Now that I read him on a regular basis, which I love to do, I love to read his homilies of the Daily Mass, which you can do on either EWTNnews.com or the Vatican website. You can see how he's constantly taking us back to go deeper, to study what the faith has to say. Even in that very so-called controversial press conference on the way home from World Youth Day, he referred to the Catechism.
That's right.
In the issue regarding homosexuality and the clergy. But that didn't even make it.
No. Because he said, it's all been said, it's in the Catechism, the teaching is beautiful, and there it is.
He's pointing us to the Catechism. So what a difference between watching the secular media, I mean, it's night and day, or watching EWTN, hearing your radio program, and seeing, you know, the whole discourse, bringing out the beauty, bringing out what he's trying to do for the world, for families, the positive that he's trying to do. They miss it because I think in the secular media we're trying to find that soundbite, that thing that sells, that shocks, that scandalizes.
If they want someone, especially if they could get the Pope to affirm their ideology, and they could say to us, see, the Pope is going to change on this, that, or the other thing, then they think they've won, because the Catholic Church is the last bastion that is standing up against all these things that the world has accepted and now normalized and mainstream. And they refuse to believe that the Catholic Church is not going to change. change on this, and they are bound and determined that if they don't get us to change, they think that they're going to make us look like, you know, people with 3 heads and very bizarre and out there in left field somewhere. And so this is why we're doing this program, to help you differentiate the fact from fiction. Really, really important to discern what's coming at you, and I talk about this all the time in my radio program, and to understand the terminology, the way they twist things. I mean, you know, ladies working in the pro-life movement, the whole term pro-choice came about to desensitize us to the idea of abortion.
Well, they don't like when we use the word
pro-abortion.
They don't like that. And I always say pro-choice. Well, it's okay to be pro-choice about the flavor of ice cream or what cereal you want to have for breakfast, but they're not in favor of choice, because, you know, any woman who's thinking about whether I want to have an abortion now, you go to Planned Parenthood or any abortion clinic, they're only selling you an abortion. Where's the choice? They're not giving you a pregnancy test and saying, is this a viable pregnancy, and would you like to make an adoption plan, or the abortion. That's choice. They don't do that. They're only there to sell the abortion.
And the women say, I'm here because I feel I have no choice.
Have no other choice. I know.
It's interesting in that, going back to that documentary that I did, I actually shared with this anchorman my reversion to the church. Now, he knows me. We've worked together on the streets of Detroit as reporters for many years. And I gave a mini version of my testimony, telling how it was really the church's teachings that saved my life and my marriage. And then I talked about what the church teaches on these various issues, on you know, people with same-sex attraction, and also the issue of marriage and pro-life and whatnot. The only thing that made it on the air, and he had me on several times, that he never mentioned my story, never mentioned that I'd come back into the church. But there were 2 other women he interviewed. Both of those women, he was in their homes or on their patio looking very cozy with them, and these women were for you know, ordaining women in the priesthood. They were pro-contraception, pro-abortion, and it was very interesting the way he related to them and made them look as if they're the ones who really have a story to tell. And I was just up there, you know, putting out the rules of the church along with the clergy that they interviewed, including Archbishop Ignorant from the Archdiocese of Detroit. He did give me a lot of airtime, but again, I was just up there as one of the, you know, the rule makers. Well, we're going into our break right now. When we come back, we're going to have some very interesting quotes from our Holy Father, showing us that, yes, indeed, the Holy Father, Pope Francis, is Catholic. Who knew? We'll be right back. Stay tuned on this episode of The Catholic View for Women. Welcome back once again to The Catholic View for Women, where we give you news and views from a truly Catholic perspective. In this episode, we're talking about Newsflash, the Pope is still Catholic, helping you differentiate between fact and fiction when you're watching the media, not just the news media, but overall programming where this constant desensitization is occurring. We have some really good quotes from the Holy Father that we want to share with you. Pope Francis has been painted very incorrectly by the secular media as if he's someone, not that he can, but as he's someone who's going to go away from core doctrine of the church. That cannot happen. And again, as Catholics, we need to understand what can change and what can't change. So we're going to give you some quotes to show you just how beautiful our Holy Father is in terms of really affirming the core teachings of the church, despite what the secular media say.
Well, in particular, you know, when Pope Francis was in the Holy Land in the spring of 2014, when he went to Manger Square in Bethlehem, listen to what he said. He said, "The child Jesus born in Bethlehem is the sign given by God to those who awaited salvation, and he remains forever the sign of God's tenderness and presence in our world. The angel announces to the shepherds, 'This will be a sign for you. You will find a child.' Today, too, children are a sign. They are a sign of hope, a sign of life, but also a diagnostic sign, a marker indicating the health of families, society, and the entire world. Wherever children are accepted, loved, cared for, and protected, the family is healthy, society is more healthy, and the world is more human." Here we can think of the work carried out by Epaphroditus Paul VI Institute for hearing and speech impaired Palestinian children. It is the very real sign of God's goodness. It is a clear sign that society is healthier. I mean, he's pointing here to the children. Notice what he's saying. Families that have children are healthier. So what does that say? Parents who abort their children are not going to have a healthy relationship. And we know that also from our work in the pro-life movement. Parents, a couple that aborts their children, they end up having problems with them with their marriage, and many of them go on to a divorce. What he's saying is having children is a healthy thing. More children means healthier marriages, society, and family. And I mean, that's a very clear statement.
It's a powerful pro-life thought.
Yeah.
Affirming the goodness of children. We don't hear that often enough in the media, secular media. We hear that children are a burden, that we saw Time magazine last year saying that
about
the child-free
that
life
they're
is
happier, and this is the way you have to live without children.
And the Holy Father called it a culture of comfort, where we replace sometimes pets, instead of
right
children.
Here, actually, he what Astrid is referring to is where he was meeting with married couples, which he often does, or newly married couples, and he gave a homily talking about the importance of family. The other thing he said, in addition to the situation with the children, and this is what I love, having my marriage saved through the church teachings, is that you don't quit. Now, it's not always possible to save a marriage, of course, depending on the circumstances, but we have a throwaway culture where people just don't put a lot of emphasis on, oh gosh, they signed the prenups, and if it doesn't work out, they're out the door. He's talking, getting back to the point about children, this culture of well-being convinced us it's better not to have children. It's better. You can go explore the world, go on holiday, you can have a villa in the countryside, you can be carefree. It might be better, more comfortable to have a dog, 2 cats, and the love goes to the 2 cats and the dog. He also went on to say, as I mentioned in this homily, the importance of sticking it out. Every single day you make that decision as a married person to work on that relationship in good times and in bad. Now, again, as we said, sometimes it's always not possible to save a marriage, and the church wouldn't expect anyone to stay in a severely abusive situation. That's not what we're talking about. But he's saying we can't have this throwaway culture anymore, and yet the media are portraying him very, very differently. And it's very, very unfair. It really is. And it's very misleading. And it's really bad journalism when you come right down to it.
That's right.
They miss the good stuff. I mean, in that same statement, he's talking about the 3 planks of marriage.
Right.
He said fertility is one of them, the beauty of marriage, the fruitfulness, faithfulness, and perseverance. And he even mentioned couples that are going through infertility.
Right.
It's a cross, because of illness or whatever. They can't have children, but they're called to a spiritual, fruitfulness. So many beautiful statements that I think are so healing to hear. People need to hear them. They're missed if we're not watching or hearing Catholic media.
And I would like to challenge, too, our viewers to remember that to really understand what the church teaches, and do they really appreciate the fact that the church cannot change on these core teachings?
Absolutely not.
And I think some people are confused, because I've had people say to me, people who are pretty well educated say, is the Pope going to change this? And I would say, really?
Really?
Let's stop and think about what you're saying.
Yeah.
We have to go back to the basics, dig deeper, and understand what the church teaches, what can change, and what can't change.
And Teresa, your book, God's Bucket List, you mentioned something so beautiful. You say, people tell you, Teresa, aren't you preaching to the choir? When you explain these basic things. And what is your response to them?
Have you heard the choir lately? Well, and I say that for myself, because I was in the pews when I was coming back to the church, and even though I was back going to Mass and receiving the sacraments, had gone to confession, there was so much I didn't know about my own faith. And we've been talking also in this series about the fact that our faith is an ongoing process, our relationship with God. We don't want to remain stagnant, that we're constantly learning and growing. And that's one of the reasons why we give so many resources on this show, that the choir needs practice. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice.
And I feel, too, like with my reversion, I'm still learning, and it was you, Teresa, who told me about all the Vatican websites to go to, and you can see what the Pope is saying. I never realized that, and now I know, and so I love seeing what Pope Francis is saying all the time. I think very often, so many of us, you go to Mass and receive the sacraments, but you're not really paying attention to all the beautiful news services that are out there that tell you more.
Yeah, how many people go on those websites? And how many people are getting the majority of their news still, and the statistics back this up, they're still getting the majority of their news from the major broadcast networks.
Right.
The major, not even some of the cable networks, which are a little bit better, the major broadcast networks.
And they make it attractive. They make the headlines a certain way that might catch your eye. But be careful, because they have an agenda, and they're made to sell. They want to sell, and so be careful about how they spin it. It might not be true. You might be missing a whole part of it. And I also want to mention, Catholics might be thinking, well, I know the faith. I can, I don't have to dig deeper. But also remember that we're called to evangelize. So when you read these news sources from the Vatican, it shows you how to be, a good how to evangelize.
Right.
For example, like how to speak to somebody who's going through infertility, how to give them hope, somebody who's had an abortion, how to give them hope. What does the church say? That way, when you encounter someone, you'll have the words of Christ, of the church to give them hope and comfort.
I mean, really what they should do is when you hear one of those sound bites in the secular media saying, Pope Francis changing teaching on okay. Go on now and see.
Go on EWTNnews.com or news.va
and say,
or
okay,
tune
Pope
into
Francis
News Nightly.
said this at the audience
Right.
today. The media said it said that. Let me read the whole thing, and because they put the entire talk there, And then also too, I know the crew gets up in the middle of the night here at the network so that they can cover that audience live for us, and what you could do is you could DVR it every Wednesday that you get that audience. You could watch it yourself. I mean, it's so beautiful to do.
And grab these articles, post them on Facebook. How easy is it to share, and people will get the truth.
Well, Teresa, your book, Noise, really, I think it's going to be part of our homework. But I want to point out, this is a book you wrote several years ago.
My first book. It's been revised 3 times because of the changing information.
And basically the subtitle is How Our Media-Saturated Culture Dominates Lives and Dismantles Families. And that's really what the media is doing. They're dismantling families because of the poison that, and you just sit there and you listen to it. It's like garbage in, garbage out. You're not really getting the truth. I just want to read, if we can, there's really this one part of your book. It's from the chapter, It's No Big Deal. And let's just page actually 25. If you have your book at home, you can look at it. And let me just read this part. Several factors have led to the current sorry state of the mass media. The very real liberal agenda of Hollywood, increased competition from cable TV and the Telecommunications Act of 1996, which led to media consolidation and the placement of profit before public interest. Add to this recipe a large quantity of consumer apathy, and watch the revenues of stock market-driven media conglomerates grow. So we cannot expect the media giants to the reins in on themselves until their bottom line is affected. Time Warner, Sony, Disney, and of course Disney has been a big disappointment lately, CBS, Viacom, and others, and the Hearst Corporation, Liberty Media, and Comcast Corporation are concerned only about deals that translated to greater revenues. These conglomerates have the support of Hollywood producers, radio and TV management, program and news directors, porn site operators, video game marketers, and anyone else who earns a living through the direct or indirect marketing distribution of products that compromise the values on which this country was founded. Although they appear to be in denial, the media mega powers know that it is a big deal, and they even occasionally give us a glimpse of their own awareness of their perversive influence. Such was the case when CBS president Les Moonves candidly stated to a Washington Post reporter, "Anyone who thinks the media have nothing to do with youth violence is an idiot." Look what he said. I mean, come on.
And that's a network official saying that there's
That's
a direct
right.
admitting there's a direct correlation between what we see and are fed on the air, as you said, garbage in, garbage out,
Garbage in, garbage out.
and how it's affecting us on a regular
Exactly.
basis. So my suggestion as we get to wrap up the show and you're going to do the homework would be for people to, again, if you hear something or read something about the church, about the faith issue, about Jesus, about the Bible, whatever, to make sure that you go to a solid source, such as EWTN News Nightly, this show, Catholic View for Women,
Right.
my radio show, different websites that are truly Catholic websites, such as, well, we mentioned the National Catholic Register, news.va. We have actually on our website all of these different contacts for you, and again, these resources, really, really important to, if you hear something, don't panic, take a deep breath, and see what the church and the Pope really had to say. So you have the homework right there, I think, right, Janet?
Yes, I do. And like you just said, the first is visit the Vatican News website, which is www.news.va. You should bookmark that so you can
Right.
go to it every day and just see what is being said outside the Vatican. And of course, EWTN News Nightly program with Brian Patrick. It airs Monday through Friday. Go to EWTN.com for their schedule in your area. Of course, EWTN also has their own news site. It's EWTNnews.com. Visit there. And of course, I have to give a plug for the National Catholic Register. Everyone should have this newspaper. This is a great newspaper to have in your home, so get your subscription to the National Catholic Register. Of course, Teresa, your book, Noise, and also God's Bucket List, and both those books are available at the Religious Catalog. And in closing, I want to remind our EWTN audience to contact us at the Catholic View for Women, because we have a monthly e-letter, and we're going to be answering in that monthly e-letter a lot of your questions that come in to us through email, which we do answer individually, but then we can cover it more in depth. Monthly e-letter you can subscribe on the CatholicViewForWomen.com.
And I really want to encourage you, as Janet said, to visit all of these different news sites. I use them in putting together my newscasts every day for my radio show. They're very helpful, and they are the actual statements right from the Vatican, right from the Pope. Thanks for watching The Catholic View for Women. Don't forget, as Janet said, to visit our website, thecatholicviewforwomen.com. And remember, newsflash, the Pope is and always will be Catholic. Go figure. See you next time.